In support of the Leader of Opposition, please welcome the Deputy Leader of Opposition, Honorable Cavallo Kakena. Ordinary Member of Opposition, please welcome Honorable Terafina Ushona. And last but not least, to maintain discipline and of course close off the defense for the opposition this morning, please welcome the Chief Whip of Opposition, Sherika Novasis. Ladies and gentlemen, just once again a reminder of the rules of engagement for the final. Each speaker gets 7 minutes to articulate their case. First minute is protected. The 5 minutes in between are open for points of information. Each point of information can only last for 15 seconds. We ask that the speakers articulate their point of information through the microphone clearly. You're allowed minimum of 2 points of information, after which you can reject ad infinitum the rest of them. No more than 15 seconds for each point of information. On that note, let's welcome the Prime Minister to open up the debate and define the motion. Right Honorable Prime Minister Iris Shimanda. Round of applause for her, please.
Panel, the man on the ground, Iris Shimanda, she goes to school every single day, but she only gets an allowance of $500 a month. She goes on the internet and she sees that her favorite influencer, somebody she trusts very deeply, Pombili Shilongo, is then advertising a scheme where you can turn your $300 into $500,000. She buys into it because, one, she's in a desperate position and she can't afford basic necessities. But two, these individuals, like the Pombili Shilongos of the world, are trusted individuals with huge audiences. They've built trust through the connections that they've made with people. So there's no way that Pombili Shilongo is going to lie to her about turning her $300 into $500,000. And with the family at the back of her mind and her school and as well as basic necessities at the back of her mind, she buys into it and she gets scammed. At the end of this, she reports this particular thing. Not only does she get held accountable, but as well as the person who built the scam, but Pombili Shilongo, the person she trusted, who broke her trust, doesn't get held accountable and is simply charged on the basis they assisted with the crime, but no tangible accountability is given. Iris has now lost all form of humanity, and political instability is now at the brink because she recruits her friends that she also trusted her and also trusted Pombili, and suddenly there's war, people are getting guns, people are fighting each other, and they are angry because people aren't getting held accountable. But furthermore than that, people's money is getting stolen and the government is doing nothing about it. The Bank of Namibia is doing nothing about it, and regulatory frameworks are not in place. We think these are the things that are particularly problematic, and these are the things that we're looking at in today's debate. We live in a world where there's no accountability. But secondly, because of the scope of influence that these individuals have, it's extremely huge, and they amplify the problem of these problematic schemes and financial scammers. What do we then think that the issue is within today's debate? One, we think these influencers capitalize on admiration, and secondly, they know that there is no tangible income. We think it's particularly problematic that these people get to walk away unscathed when they've ruined real human lives and when they've caused real danger. Preemptively we say,
POI?
I'll take you later. Preemptively we say, NAST cannot come up here and tell us that individuals shouldn't be held accountable because it's not their fault. Because one, we think you've reaped the benefits, you've gotten paid, and now you actually need to be held accountable. But secondly, we think these individuals ought to take accountability, because if you are actively going to promote something, if you are the twin influencers or someone, you actively ought to do research on these particular things and ensure that what you are promoting to the public is actively true. Then the last thing, under preempts, we think, and you saying that you did not know and you were not aware is not something we respect as the law. Under the law, you are held accountable regardless of the crime that you commit, whether you knew or not. Then thirdly, dealing with the root cause and not just the influencer. We think, one, that's not mutually exclusive, because when we deal with the influencer, we are still going to be dealing with the person at the root of the cause. And then secondly, we think the amplifier ought to be held accountable because they've spread this to a bigger margin than even the person making the scheme has. And then thirdly, we think once you actively hold this person accountable, we think they are 100% likely to actively give up the people that are actually doing the scheme, because now they don't want to get the hardest punishment, so they'd rather give up the people that are actually perpetuating or actually doing these schemes. So we think we create a sense of deterrence in and of that sense, and we think those particular frameworks make the world better off than we currently have it, right? Then legally, what does legally accountable actively mean, and how is it different, or how is it not mutually exclusive to status quo? We think we want sentences that are proportional to the crime. So if you steal somebody's $500,000, or you assist in stealing someone's $500,000, or you assist in stealing that person's $500 as a student who only gets $500, we think the punishment ought to be proportional to what you've done. Sharika, I'll quickly take you.
Iris, in current status quo, everything that you described is called false advertising, and that is a crime. How is adding frameworks into current status quo going to fix your issues?
We think what fixes the issue is deterring these individuals from partaking in the promotion of these things in the first place. Because me as an influencer, if I know this sounds like a scam, in current status quo, we don't have influencers that actively say, oh, this 500 turning into 500,000, I probably won't do it. We have people like varsity influencers actively buying into these things. Even scammers who scam for phones, there are students at UNAM that actively participate in those things because there are no regulatory frameworks to actively hold them accountable. We think those things are particularly important, and those are the things that we deter. We think, and why do we think it's particularly important that influencers stay away from these things? The moment that influencers no longer buy into this idea, we think that it cuts or like the financial risks that people have, because if you don't have somebody actively pushing your narrative and spreading it to the rest of the public, we don't think people are likely to buy into it, because it's not everywhere. You're not seeing it everywhere, and you're not seeing a trusted face actively pushing these particular narratives. So we think that's particularly important, and the thing that's what we advocate for. We think on our side, we actively solve the problem by actively creating deterrence, not only of these financial schemes, but also of the influencers that would actually buy into these things and make the problem worse than it ought to be. We thank you.
We thank the Right Honorable Prime Minister for opening up the case and defining the motion for this morning. Let's please welcome the Leader of Opposition, Honorable Benson Temo, to set his case. Round of applause for him, please.
I'll begin in 3, 2, 1. We don't think Iris's case solves anything. If the scammers are still there, they will continue scamming people. It's not stopping the promotion that is definitely going to stop the scammers. It's actively going out for these scammers. Iris is desperate for money and will continue being desperate for money regardless if there's an influencer telling her that she can make money easy in this way or in that way. Scammers will still exist. What happens then on their side of the house is that it becomes much harder to catch the scammers in the first place because they go for more sketchier, like they go for more sophisticated ways of actually advertising these scams. They won't then also just go on social media and say, you'll get this much money. Now they'll be scared of doing that. They will be doing something else completely harder to achieve, right? Cool. We already believe, like Sharika asked in a POI, that the current problem is not that they don't exist the frameworks to hold these people accountable. The problem in status quo is the fact that there is like soft enforcement on the laws that currently exist. The Banking Institutions Act, Article 77, already criminalizes the promotion of illegal financial schemes. I don't see what IRS is necessarily doing different from what already exists in status quo. Right? Cool. She says that these things are also like they are not mutually exclusive, that you can go after the scammers and that you can go after the promoters in the first place. We tell you, one, you're less likely to go after the scammers in the first place because now at least you have someone in jail. So it is like that less incentive to go out and look for the other person because the bank is going to tell you, hey, someone is already in jail for this. Maybe you should be happy about that. But also, two, you don't need to spread the resources thin, bro. Like, you can also just go after the scammers. We believe that if there is more resources going after the scammers, then that is when it's easier to actually catch the scammers in the first place, right? What arguments then will I bring to you within today's debate? I will tell you how the Namibian market is already very heavily regulated and how we somehow need these influencers in order to lift high impact or emerging startups from the ground, right? Cool. What is the current problem within today's debate? Not the lack of frameworks, but the lack of enforcement thereof, right? We have a very thorough Banking Institutions Act that deals with illegal financial schemes very well. How does this lack of enforcement is likely to play out in the real world, right?
Benson.
I'll take you later. NDP 5, which is the NDP that just ended, mentioned that we want to reduce the amount of time that you want to start a business to like 5 days. That did not happen. It still takes you like 64 days to start a business according to current market research, right? NDP 6 came out recently and it had no mention on how NDP 5 actually failed to achieve the mandate that it actually was supposed to play for. We believe that is the exact same thing that is going to happen on their side of the house, where they are going to tell you, hey, we have these beautiful laws, but there is nothing actually that goes out there to ensure that these laws that these guys are promoting are actually being enforced. On markets then, one, Namibia already has a very highly regulated financial market. We believe this because of the current laws that already exist. But two, we believe that enforcing or at least creating even more policies and more frameworks for this market is when it actually makes business inefficient. That is not something we want from our side of the house. We want investors to have a confidence that they can start a business and that it will be like fast enough and it won't be jammed by like cranky regulations that proposition brings to you within today's debate. I'll take a POI.
Benson, don't you think that these influencers are more likely to give up people who actually perpetuate the scam if they're faced with like 15 years in prison?
No. Okay. Why then do we value these influencers, right? This is the second part of my case. One, we value these influencers because of the emerging markets. We believe that the same way that IRS framed that people do not have money currently is the same frame that we're going to use within today's debate. What their side does what their side does then is that one, you make people less likely to speak about financial investments in the first place, especially in areas like social media, because they are scared of what's going to happen to them if they even just try to promote something else. Even if these things could be legal, because of the way that these things can be a bit confusing or ambiguous at a time, any sort of conversation around financial investments is going to be diverted because of the sheer legal scare of being criminally prosecuted for that. We need influencers for the emerging markets because these people, or at least startups, need to signal trust to some people, right? The avenue that they use for this is influencers. But also too, they need to like spread this message, or at least to spread their business message across social media in order for them to have the buy-in that they need to generate revenue. But also, because of like other ways of achieving, of like gaining that social capital is much harder to do on their side of the house. Social media should be a place in which people that have great business ideas go on and speak about these ideas without having the fear of being legally prosecuted. What this then does is that, one, they have less avenues for acquiring capital in their side of the house, but also it creates a monopoly effect that is highly like counterproductive for smaller businesses, because, or at least for smaller people promoting this businesses, because now when these legal battles eventually come, even if you are not necessarily guilty of promoting these illegal financial schemes, the moment that you are implicated in it, you're gonna have to spend money to get yourself out of that legal battle. We believe that in Namibia, many social media influencers, or at least promoters of these things, already do not have money to go on and fight these legal battles. Who has money? The most sophisticated illegal financial scammers. These are the guys that will use that will use the money that they have and that they've scammed people from to actually fight these legal battles, right? This is unfair. This creates unfair prosecution of people that might have not even been implicated in this act. What they have on their side of the house is sending poorer people to jail simply because they were trying to make more money, like Ira said in her side of the house, right? We do not want scammers to get away with illegal financial schemes while poor people are trying to live themselves off the market. And with that, I'm supremely proud to oppose.
We thank the LO for accepting the definition of the motion and constructing the arguments against the Prime Minister. We now call on the Deputy Prime Minister as the next speaker with the responsibility to refute the case of the first opposition, rebuild the case of the first proposition, and may add new arguments to the case of the first proposition. Please give a warm round of applause to Honorable Ara David.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a difference between marketing for a company and marketing for a scammer. So ladies and gentlemen, when Benson comes up here and tries to confuse us by saying that we're gonna scare these people from actually advertising small businesses that need the advertising boost, we feel like that generally is wrong and doesn't hold any context within today's debate. Because if you know something is legally real and it does exist, if you know that the products that you're advertising on your page actually exist, then you wouldn't be scared to post it on your page, right? Ladies and gentlemen, this brings me to one of the most important points within today's debate, which is saying that we are trying to avoid the negligence that comes with influencers and promoters, right? You need to do a background check on anything before you put it on your page in order not to mislead the nation, right? We as a side government, and also along with the Banking Act or whatsoever, with the act that was mentioned by them, we need to understand that it is our direct obligation to protect these people or to protect the Namibian citizens from false information, irregardless of whatsoever, right? So when you generalize it, when they tell us about how media promotion and false advertising is thing already exists, we tell you that when you generalize it like this is when you have softer enforcement, and this is when you have less effect or whatsoever. We need people to be held accountable to the proportion of the crimes that they have committed within our society, irregardless, and we do not care if you put that product, if you talk about long reach, Herbalife, and it affects people in our community, that Ponzi scheme, we do not care who you are, and we do not care in what capacity. I will take you later. We do not care in what capacity you come as the poor man who needed bread. You have no right to actually mislead the nation at any point or at any level, right? So ladies and gentlemen, what do we then get more from Benson, right? He says that Benson comes up here and says that if the scammers exist, it will still go on. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to understand one thing. This is a chain of command. Just like a company exists, right? You guys see the Namco case. That's the same way they had to wrap up everyone that was involved in it. This is a chain of command. I am the enforcer and the financial scheme belongs to me, but the marketing department belongs to Benson. So Benson, because he is the channel in which I used to get through to the community at large, he should be held accountable in order for us to actually cut it as a whole, right? So ladies and gentlemen, he also comes up here and he says that we're gonna soften everything, and he say once we have these people in custody, the law enforcers become lazy to actually find the actual perpetrators. Like we said, influencers are not willing to pay the price on their own, and I will take you later, are not willing to pay the price on their own, and they're actually willing to give up the names of these perpetrators and bring down the whole entire chain. And that is what we are looking for. When we talk about stricter measures, this is what we are looking for. We are looking for people to take accountability and to give up the whole entire channel in order to protect our citizens, right? Before I move on, quickly.
When the directors of Namco were arrested, were the people that delivered the contracts to Enecon also jailed?
That doesn't make sense, right? You need to understand one thing. The people that deliver the contracts to Enecon, they're probably jailed. Do you know them? You need to understand one thing, and one thing in particular, right? If you play a direct role into getting the people to the point that they're not supposed to be at, we feel like it is essential for the government, and we feel that it is essential for these regulatory frameworks to hold you accountable at that same capacity. We're not saying that you're gonna face 15 years of prison for scamming these people, but you're gonna face the yes, or you're gonna pay the fines. You're gonna have to pay for what you have done to the level of what you have contributed to this, right? So furthermore, he also tells us about how guys, stop disturbing me, man. He also tells us that it scares he also tells us about how we need influencers for the emerging market, or for the emerging market, and we feel like that if it is not illegal, and if we can get our influencers to become more mind of what they put on their social media, given the influence and the effect they have on society, we feel like we have won as side government, and we feel like we have won as a regulatory framework in actually trying to reduce the number of financial schemes that exist. Now moving on to my arguments, right? So number one, we tell you that we are trying to ensure accountability in the financial sector, right? These people are passive and direct actors, right? Negligently or sometimes even directly, right? So we need to understand that they are a material aspect in whatever goes down. They are the channel in which these people go through to actually get to the community. Without these people, I wouldn't know that my favorite artist Gaza is making 5 million from Forex if he doesn't put it on his page, and I wouldn't opt for that option. We tell you that these people are a material aspect in this, and by cutting them down, we cut down the direct channel. And if you guys talk about actually going to the root, this is the actual direct route, or actually we talk about the most influential route, or how we get to these people, right? We tell you that why is this necessarily important, right? Ladies and gentlemen, we need to understand that by holding these creators accountable, not only do we make them mind and we create a safer society because less of financial schemes are making it to our public, but we also then are able to catch the actual perpetrators, because no one is going to catch a bullet for you. I am going to snitch on you if I'm caught doing this, and we actually create a better society, and we actually achieve our actual mandate, or we actually are able to deter these crimes as a whole, right? So moving on to my second, right? We create a safer we try to build a public trust in the financial environment. Just like I told you guys before, I'm sounding repetitive, right? But safety is all I care about. I want my money to go into a financial market where I can get actual returns, and where I don't get scammed and my livelihood isn't actually threatened. And I feel like if the public sector, or if the financial sector actually holds each and every single person accountable, we actually create a community or a society that's conducive enough for me to invest my funds in, and that can actually change a young man's life. I cannot be putting my school funds into funny pyramid schemes that don't actually bring out any returns. Tomorrow I have to drop out of school because of finances, which could have all been deterred if I hadn't seen the advertisement that was posted by my favorite influencer, right? So ladies and gentlemen, in this debate, basically what we tell you aside government is that, number one, we have to cut it at the root of it. We have to cut the problem at the root of its problem. We have to cut it at its roots and make sure that it doesn't make it out to the public. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to propose. Thank you.
We thank the Right Honorable Deputy Prime Minister for refuting the case of the first opposition and rebuilding the case of the Right Honorable Prime Minister. We now provide platform to the Deputy Leader of Opposition, whose responsibility is to continue refutation of case of the first proposition, rebuild arguments of the first opposition, and judges may add new arguments to the case of the first opposition. Please give a warm round of applause to Honorable Cavallo Kakena.
I would like to start my speech by responding to some of the points that were raised by government. The Prime Minister said that the regulatory frameworks are not in place, but according to the Financial Action Task Force report on why Namibia was grey-listed in 2024, Namibia has good enough regulation, but the main problem is enforcement, which also strengthens the argument that was mentioned by the Leader of Opposition. The Deputy Prime Minister said people should be verifying these things themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, the average Namibian does not walk around with an MBA or walk around with knowledge on financial literacy. The current financial literacy statistics for Namibia, according to the Namibia Statistics Agency, mention that less than 50%, actually less than 45% of Namibian adults, that is the population between ages 15 and 59, do not have financial literacy. Have financial literacy, while the remaining over 55% lack financial literacy. So how is the average Namibian just supposed to be verifying these things by themselves? And then another thing I would like to mention is that it's impossible for the average Namibian or the influencers, by the way, could fall into the larger chunk of 55% of the population that are not financially literate. So, yes, so another thing I'd like to mention is that currently there is no public database that exists where you could just go on a site and Google and try to see which business is legally operating. Now, to move into another thing I'd like to say is that the Deputy Prime Minister mentioned that when influencers are caught, they will snitch, basically because they are more reachable. But how illicit financial schemes operate, a main characteristic of them is asymmetries of information, where certain things are not disclosed. So can we possibly just entertain the possibility that this influencer does not even know who they are directly dealing with, especially in this era of deepfake technologies? Now, moving to my case, we find it concerning when government proposes stricter regulations and when government also proposes that influencers should basically be jailed. And here's why. Ladies and gentlemen, the Namibia that we are currently existing in is characterized by a booming informal sector. The current regulations that exist, especially stipulated by the Namibia Financial Institution Supervisory Authority, that is NAMFISA, for micro-lenders to get registered, I was so shocked. You need to have at least 10,000 Namibia dollars for you to be able to register your micro-lender. That is jarring. And then another thing, ladies and gentlemen, is that we are in Namibia that will soon be implementing the instant payment solution. Instant payment solution means that we are going to have more people integrated into the digital economy, and then we are also going to have money moving around faster. So when we decide that we are going to jail these influencers who are basically the direct contact of people in leadership positions to the layman on the street, because the average Namibian lacks financial literacy, and they lack financial literacy, but they use social media more. So how then are we going to successfully implement this instant payment solution in Namibia if government is proposing stricter regulation and government is proposing that we arrest influencers for promoting certain things? And then another thing I want to mention is a regulation already exists in the Banking Institution Act number 13 of 2023 that if you are caught promoting an illicit financial scheme, you should be penalized according to the law, and you are liable to pay fees for up to 1 million. So you see, the problem is not the regulation, the problem is the enforcement of that regulation. Now, to strengthen my leader of opposition's case, ladies and gentlemen, people are not seeking money. People are desperate for hope. So this is a case of hope.
POI,
Taken. Let
if
me take it now.
55% of Namibians are financially illiterate, why would you continue letting social media influencers scam them on social media?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. What you need to understand is majority of the Namibians are not privileged enough to make it all the way to attend a Bank of Namibia presentation at NAST on financial literacy. So these people spend most of their time on social media. So if an influencer is talking about financial literacy or is giving some sort of advice, this could influence to an extent the decisions that the average Namibian makes. I hope that satisfies your POI. Now back to strengthening my leader of opposition's case. Like I mentioned, people are not seeking out money, they are seeking out hope. We have existing frameworks that are targeted at prosecuting these people that are promoting. I will take you a bit later. That are targeted at promoting these illicit targeted at persecuting people that are promoting these illicit financial schemes. So again, just to mention, the issue here is strengthening enforcement. What government is trying to do is they are trying to deal with the leaves and not the root of the problem. They are basically just addressing the symptoms of the problem and not the main problem itself. Can't take your POI. Time is done. Okay. And then another thing I would like to clarify is that you are less likely to chase after criminals if you already have influencers in jail. Again, government, you would just be addressing the leaves and not the roots. Before my time ends, I just want to mention that so on our side of the government, by not introducing these stricter regulations and encouraging enforcement, it means that this money that you are spending on chasing after influencers or on just introducing stricter regulations, you could use that to liaise with other institutions in SADC and better track the people that are at the root cause of operations, because
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Speaker. There's a debate next year as well. We thank the DLO for giving us those insights. We now move over to the member of government, also responsible for extension, to defend the general direction and case of the first proposition, continue refutation of the first opposition team, and of course also has room to develop a new argument that is different from but consistent with the case of the first proposition. Please give a warm round of applause to Honorable Abraham Angula.
Before I start, I'll only be taking a PI in my 4th minute from Sherika. So cool. My speech starts in 3, 2, 1. I find it very hilarious that these guys talk to you about how 55% of Namibians don't have financial literacy, but still they subjugate this 55% of Namibians to being scammed on social media by these influencers. And when the scam actually occurs, they don't have regulations and punishment which is harsh enough to punish these people. We think it's fundamentally a problem when they make a concession that people don't know what they're doing, and social media has so much power, but still they allow people to go through this. I'm going to systematically deal with their case and tell you why they lose this debate inherently. The reason Benson couldn't answer my POI when I asked him, when we catch these scammers, aren't they just going to give up the people that do the scams, is is because he knows it's the truth. If you catch the influencers that are actually portraying the scams on social media, they are much more likely to give out the people who actually do the scams, because we think that if you threaten them to, like with serving jail time proportional to the crime which you commit, we think that these individuals are not likely to keep quiet and say, it's okay, I'll just serve the jail time. We think they're likely to give up the people who actually perpetuate the scam, thus solving the problem that we have at the end of the day. I said my 4th minute, Benson, don't test me. Cool. Second thing is, they seem to not want to punish the influencers, because Benson talks about freedom of speech and why it's so important, but we talk to you about, look, it's very, very important. These influencers get paid to promote these scams. At a point at which you get paid to promote a scam and you reap the rewards, you ought also reap the punishment which comes from when you scam people. You ruin people's livelihoods, you ruin their lives. We think it's fundamentally, like, morally abhorrent for such things to happen in this debate. But secondly, and just a funny thing about their team in general, their case is a bit weird. Like, because Sherika POIs and she's like, look, false advertising exists in any case. Then Benson comes up and then Benson is like, no, we don't really want to punish people because we want people to have freedom of speech. Just the inconsistency in and of itself means that we can't buy into anything that they're saying. They don't know what they want, they don't know how they're going to do it, and if you look at it at the end of the day, they have no solvency for what their policy actually does. I'm going to prove to you, even though they're inconsistent, I'm going to respond to Sherika's argument and then to Benson's argument and prove to you why, even if in a world where it was one of the two, they're both wrong. Cool. The second thing then is, what exactly is opposition's problem if you look at it at the crust of it? Opposition's problem is that apparently policy exists, there's no implementation. Telling you that we're going to punish people harshly and make them do 15 or 10 years proportional to their crime is the implementation that they're looking for. We're implementing this thing, we're making it harshly. The question then beckons, if you're saying that the policies exist and you want to be consistent, or you're consistent with the principle of you think that people should be punished, then what's the problem with punishing people more harshly for doing the crime? What's the problem with making sure that if somebody does something wrong, we're going to make it tenfold? If you scam somebody out of $500,000, we're going to make sure you sit years and years in prison. They're principally consistent because they say, look, it already exists, our problem is implementation. We're giving you the implementation, but we're telling you we're going to do it even more harshly. And if you agree, then you shouldn't have a problem with punishing people more harshly, because they're stealing from other people, they're ruining people's livelihoods. It's a very, very morally abhorrent thing to do. Cool. Let's really deal with some of the matter that they have in the debate before I move into what my positive contribution is to the debate. Couple of things. So firstly, is this whole
You
idea...
said you'll take me now.
No, I said 4th minute, my dear. Read. Cool. Couple of things. First thing is this idea about how scammers still exist, we don't solve the problem. We think a couple of things. Number one, that argument isn't inherently true, because we explained to you how influencers are likely to give up the scammers, but then Benson goes on to say that, look, no, people are just going to move into other avenues of scamming. Couple of things. Number one, even if people move into other avenues of scamming, we think that the bank's obligation is still to stop crime. So because someone says I'm going to move somewhere else and steal somewhere else, doesn't mean you don't stop crime there. We're going to stop it where it is now, and then we're going to stop it when you move to the other avenue, because you're still going to sit 15 years. Either way, it doesn't matter to us. So the punishment is the punishment, and it's consistent. They're trying to play a very funny psychological trick on you. They're trying to make it seem as though when we do this, it's just going to move somewhere else. And if it moves there, Benson, I'm going to go there as well, and I'm going to stop it there. It doesn't actually matter. Second response, they talk about how scammers will now just... No, the second thing is how you limit freedom of speech on social media. Couple of things. Number one, we think that your right is only your right insofar as you don't limit other people's rights. Your right to freedom of speech doesn't extend insofar as you steal people's money and scam them out of their livelihoods. But the second thing in terms of that is, if you're infringing on people's livelihoods, we just don't buy into your right of freedom of speech inherently. Doesn't mean because I say something bad, but it's my freedom of speech, but I'm harming someone else, it's the right thing to do. We don't think that's particularly okay. We don't think it's true in that regard. The final thing they talk about is how, like, proposition are sending people to jail for just trying to make more money. That's what Benson says. I'm like, look, bro, does everybody who commits a crime on the basis of wanting to make more money just deserve to not be punished? If something is inherently wrong, it's inherently wrong. Whether or not you want to make more money, whether you want to feed your mom, your dad, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, it doesn't matter. If it's a crime, it's wrong, and we're going to punish it. Sherika, I'll take you quickly.
Two things. What is your extension? And then secondly, frameworks exist now, they are not being enforced. On your side, how do you ensure enforcement is suddenly going to happen?
Firstly, I can't believe you wasted your time asking about my extension when there's 2 minutes left. But secondly, we're talking to you about the regulation of these particular frameworks. Firstly, let's do a couple of things. Firstly, comparatively, they don't tell us how they're going to actually achieve their regulation. They just say that they need implementation. That's the first thing. And now she's trying to push the burden on us. But we actually have mechanization for that. Our mechanization is, look, you commit this crime, we catch the scammer is going to sit the amount of years proportional to the crime that they commit, whether it be 10 or 15 years, and we're going to implement it strictly. We're going to make sure that it actually happens, not the way that it is in status quo. Sherika actually agrees with what we're saying to you. She just don't know, she's just in denial, but it's okay. Cool. Let's get into my extension. Shirka. Now listen clearly because you have to respond to it. What is my extension? It's deterrence, right? What does this deterrence particularly look like? Why is it true? We think that one, if you punish individuals harshly, which commit these particular crimes, they're less likely to go out and do it again. The reason being, because they actually suffer the harsh consequences of the crime actually occurring in status quo. That's what we think is important. That's what we think is noteworthy. But secondly, we think that future people or future scammers who want to commit crimes, you not deter them from going for the idea in the first place because they see how harsh it is out there if you actually do things like that. That's what we think is important. But we think that people who already do it as well will stop. What is then the importance, and why should all of you in this auditorium care about the argument that I'm running? We think that you manage to solve the problem at its root. We catch this, it's very, very simple actually, if you think about it logically. You catch the influencer, you tell them you're going to sit 15 years in jail, or you're going to help us catch the guy who does the scam. He rats the guy out who does the scam. We catch him, we catch the influencer, the story is solved. Anything they're trying to tell you doesn't have the solvency that they have. We have two things for you. Number one, we have the necessity to do it because people are being scammed and they're being robbed of their livelihoods. Number two, we have the actual tangible solution and the actual tangible efficacy, which is that we get people to rat out the people who do the scams and they go to prison and they suffer the consequence of it. Chair, when you assess this debate,